I always get excited when I see like new little toys, and I guess I don't normally scroll on the link of our broadcast partner, which is StreamYard. And have you seen this before, Tim?
No, I have not.
Okay, so I remember, I think it was with Nasty Nate Scholl from Swim Nerd. He was the one who showed us the audio aspect. So like you could test your speakers, and like they have like a nice little like intro tune or something like that. And it's really, it's kind of catchy. It's like, this is, I don't even want to sing it, but I just scrolled a little bit on StreamYard, and now they have all this background music that we can play. So I think we should just put some dance pop on and see what happens. Nope, that's not going to be it for me.
No.
Maybe rock. Let's see. We are here at the Rock Station. Here, W.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
That is, I mean, that's the last piece. With us, we don't have any intro. We don't have any outro type stuff yet. It's on a list of things to do, to look to see what kind of royalty-free stuff, or if there's anyone that listens that wants to give us some cool.
This is Into Space, music. And you're wearing a SpaceX shirt, so I figured it was appropriate. You're here. You're listening to Fervent Four. Yeah. All right, I'm done. So that wasn't as exciting as I thought it was going to be, and I'm actually quite disappointed now.
We win or we learn, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that they have those things. I would like to have like crowd applause and other things like that in the world. What's going on, man?
Yeah, it's just it's a busy week. It's I always look forward to Thursdays when we record the show. Learning about something new, learning about getting to know people a little bit better when we have a new guest on, which we do this week. So I'm looking forward to that.
What do you think about meeting new people and just the aspect of it? I mean, I feel like we treat this show, sometimes we know the people, sometimes we don't. I don't know this person at all. I've known him for 17 minutes now. So I always treat it as like the coffee shop talk, meeting the person for the first time, trying to learn about them. What are your I mean, are you the same in that kind of respect of trying to?
Yeah, I like smaller groups where we can have a more intimate conversation, get to know each other. I'm just not the type of person that likes to fight for attention, for people to listen to me. So when it's a smaller group like that, I feel like the conversation is a lot more natural. We can get to know each other a bit better, as opposed to a big group. It's just kind of sensory overload for me.
Favorite icebreaker question? Do you have one?
I don't know if I do. It may be a little cliche. I know what yours is, but yeah, I mean, I just like to know a little, tell me a little bit about yourself, and it's not necessarily from a business standpoint. I wanted to get to know them in a more personal level. What are you watching on Netflix now?
Hey. That's my question. So Travis Young, how's it going, buddy?
It's going.
Pleasure to meet you now for 18 minutes. My favorite icebreaker question is, what are you watching on Netflix? And the reason why is last time I actually went and found the data point, 140 million Netflix subscribers. People watch, or they binge like 4 hours of content a day. And there's however many billions of people. So it's likely that person is watching a lot of content.
Truth be told, I don't watch a lot of Netflix anymore. It just seems like so many other platforms are pumping out new content that Netflix is, they're probably number 3 or 4 on the list of platforms that I watch.
What are you watching online? I'm currently watching Peacock because I'm rewatching The Office. And I watched WrestleMania this past weekend. But what about you, Travis? What are you watching on Netflix or online?
Yeah, I feel like as of late, there's been a lot of like these like tech companies and
yeah.
like
Are you watching? We're watching The Dropout. Are you watching that?
I have been watching The Dropout. Elizabeth Holmes, Theranos. I've also watched the documentary for that. Inventing Anna on Netflix has also been another one.
You watched that?
What's the WeWork one?
No, I'm not. No,
that was pretty wild.
The We Work, I think, is We Crash with Jared Leto and Anne Hathaway.
Yeah, on Apple TV Plus. That's something I want to get to. I watched the one on Hulu with that one, and then I'm debating if I want to watch Super Pumped, the Uber story. That's on Showtime.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that one. And, also obsessed with Ozark. So I binge watched in January the first part of the last season.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for the second part.
Well, and one of the, I would think, supporting actresses in Ozark was the main character in Inventing Anna. Very wild story.
Yes.
Kind of like if you think about it, the fake it till you make it kind of style of, I mean, she almost made it. It was pretty close.
Yeah.
I just spoiled it for everyone. Apologies, but
Julie Garner,
yeah, that was interesting. I think Ozark is coming out with the final part soon. But what's interesting is when you think about the Netflix and the streaming platforms, is how often and how much they have to promote something to be seen, to get people to actually tune in, right? I mean, we just mentioned several different titles. I wrote down 4 of them. I've never even heard of them, so that's got to register in my mind. Then I got to think about, okay, I'm going to actually go and watch that thing. I'm going to, put time down to do that thing. Like, there's a lot of effort that goes into just getting awareness out there. And I think people think that if they just push something out once, they're going to be just Granby, but really it takes a ton of time, a ton of attention and
what was it? Apple TV Plus that Coda won something at the Oscars the first time ever, Best Picture or something like that. But I want to say that it was reported it was $20 million for them to produce it, and then they had a marketing budget of $20 million. I mean, that's just insane in terms of a marketing budget.
Or is it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
To me, it's insane.
So you got $40 million in there. I don't know if there's like a back end royalty that they're giving the actors and actresses on something like that. But I look at like your ESPNs. I'm a huge WWE fan. I look at how much they have to market stuff, and when I hear a founder talk about, oh, my marketing is just I'm going to post this thing once and hope that it works. It's like, well, look at what these other platforms are doing and how often from a frequency standpoint. If you're not even doing a glimmer of that, and these are the big boys.
Right.
So you really can't keep up.
Anywho, so you grew up on the Eastern Shore, that part of the Virginia map that a lot of people forget to include when they are doing when they're including a map, including myself. For my back in 2015, we did this event called the State of the Startup Community Address, and I'm pretty sure that the Eastern Shore we left out of the state of Virginia, even though it's a part of the metro here in Virginia.
Is that okay with people from? Is that okay with people from the Eastern Shore? Are they okay with being left out? That they would prefer to be left out, or do people have a chip on their shoulder because they're left out?
It's not okay. I always tell folks, it's like, we're the peninsula, and they're like, wait, what's the peninsula? I'm like, the body of water, the piece of land is surrounded by water on all sides. So, but yes, folks tend to leave out the Eastern Shore, unfortunately. But
I blame my graphic designer at the time for doing that. I don't think he had ever been through the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. I don't think he knew it existed. So in 2016, we made a comeback tour, and the Eastern Shore was included. So please forgive me for my ridiculousness in that. But what's it like being a part of like a small area like that? Because there's not a lot of stuff. And then you moved to Virginia Beach when you're in 10th grade, up to VCU, bigger city, then to Chicago, to New York. So I mean, you're going from small to big, and then you're back here now. Like, what was that process of moving and being in a small area for so long?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, growing up with Eastern Shore was probably the best ever. Honestly, I had the experience of like having an actual childhood. So I remember like having a go-kart, right? A dirt bike, biking. We used to have like water gun fights with the, town kids. And so it was a lot of fun. I, got really dirty, had a lot of mosquito bites in the summer. And so I enjoyed it. I definitely had one of the best experiences. But I mean, I think at that time too, there was more of a thriving community. There was a lot of folks who had kids. And so as you can imagine, and like all my cousins around the same age, everybody had kids right around the same time. So it was interesting that our families all knew each other and like they all had kids at the same time. And so that was kind of fun. It was like this really like large community aspect. But to your point, it is a rural community, and so there are not a lot of resources. Part of the reason why I actually ended up leaving Northampton High School was to go to school in Virginia Beach because I wanted to take AP classes. And so I went to Bayside. Shout out Bayside Marlins. And yeah, I was there for 2 years, which felt like whoa, we're going there. We're going there. So
I'm trying to put some dates on this.
Yeah, 34. I'm 34. So I graduated high school in 2006. So
okay, so you and I are. I'm 38. Tim's a little older, but what I was getting at is you got outside as your childhood. I don't feel like that happens as much with everyone the same way. Like I would after school, I'd play basketball, I'd play football. I you do something. People play video games now. They're on their cell phones the whole time. Like it's you getting out. You were still part of that world, which is cool to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like all my like nieces and nephews do not. They're always on their phone, and so it's like just go outside. Like there's a lot to do outside.
That's weird.
And then we had to have an imagination, right? This is back before the internet actually really had.
We climbed trees back in the day.
Climb trees.
I mean, do kids even attempt to climb a tree anymore?
Not at all. Hide and seek, water gun fights, water balloon fights. Those were the best time. Exactly. I still would love to do that as an adult. Like, honestly, let's go to Mount Trashmore and have a
drink out of a garden hose, right, Zach?
that is something I will not do again.
Yeah, I can pass on that too. But yeah, and so like after high school, I went to VCU Richmond. So to your point, right, a larger city. That was the first time I felt like I was like, wow, I'm in a large city, comparatively so, right? And VCU was like amazing. That was the first time I actually got to meet a lot of other different folks from different backgrounds, and so VCU has a extremely like diverse community of students, and so met people from all types of walks of life. And yeah, majored in economics and finance. At the time, I really wanted to be a banker, and did actually worked at the Fed, interned there, and then ended up getting a job at JP Chase in Chicago. And Chicago has its own set of rules and standards, and so it was interesting trying to get acclimated to the weather for one. And yeah, it was a good time. Great food scene.
What was your favorite Chicago food?
Chicago food. Oh, wow. Chicago has, there's this whole debate about the pizza, right?
The lasagna
deep dish versus, I used to call it lasagna. It is basically a pie for sure. And it is a piece of pie, but, my favorites was like, Skip Uno's, it was Illuminati's or Giordano's were like my two favorite. I think Illuminati's probably would beat it. Portillo's, they do like the hot dog, but I'm not really a big fan of hot dogs ever since, being a kid, never really liked or enjoyed hot dogs. I always skip those. But there's this one place called Big Star. It was Northwest Chicago. I think the neighborhood was Wicker Park. And I used to do like this really amazing like fish taco. Awesome. Best taco that I've actually ever had. I will say that, yeah. Best taco ever. And then on Tuesday,
Big Star.
And then on Tuesdays, they also used to do like $3 whiskey shots. So we used to go on a Tuesday and get really wasted and, drink all the whiskey and eat tacos. So
we haven't asked this question in a while, but it seems fitting right now.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say this area from a food or drink standpoint is really known for? I mean, Chicago, so many other places have their thing. What is our staple?
I would say seafood. I mean, we're surrounded by water. And so like, growing up on Eastern Shore, I used to go shucking oysters with my dad and like, planting them back in the bay. And so at the time I did not eat oysters at all. I hated seafood, honestly. But, as I grew up, and had more of an adult palate, I was like, it's actually not that bad. But seafood, there's also this drink called the Crush. I guess it might be a Virginia Beach standard with the Crush Ice. So that's I feel like that's the standard
Crush
here.
From Waterman's.
Maybe
yes.
that is like the staple of the area, the Orange Crush.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. I mean, wow, after all this time, we finally figured it out.
I know, and it wasn't until just now asking Travis a question, I'm like, man, maybe the Orange Crush has some legs. Because we have it's spring break right now, and so there's a lot of people that we know that are in Virginia Beach from either the New York area or from the Michigan area, and people so like they'll push on Facebook or whatever, hey, what should we do? And we're like, you got to hit Waterman's and get a crush at least once before you leave.
The problem with an orange crush has
no
nothing to
problem.
do with the taste. No, there's nothing the matter. Okay, you're right. I just need to say they are so lethal that you can drink so many of them and have no clue, number one, how many you've had or what it's doing to you, because it's just like you don't taste the alcohol. It is.
Yeah.
I remember I've only been to that place, Waterman's, once and had those drinks, and it was at a reception for a wedding. Oh, so maybe that's it. The orange crush. Because some people say the white sauce at Mexican, because that's really only a thing here, which is weird because I would have thought it was in Northern Virginia, but it's not. And seafood comes up, but I think seafood's too broad, maybe. But so you said oysters.
What about the like fried soft shell crabs? I like talked to a lot of friends when I used to live in New York, and they were like, "What's that?" I was like, "You never had like a fried soft shell crab?" And they're like, "No." I think that might be.
I have a seafood allergy, so I can't eat seafood. It's unfortunate, but I'm going to take your word for it and say,
yeah.
Hey, you know,
I just, you know, and the reason that I'm interested is I like another opinion, but two, it's just like, how can we put something on the map to really market this area because I'm just curious everyone's input, what their opinion is.
Well, like the Bahamas has like that dark and stormy, or maybe it's Bermuda. You got New Orleans. There's a special drink there, so maybe there is something.
Hurricane,
yeah. Maybe there is something like that.
I don't know if the Manhattan actually originated in Manhattan, but you know, there's that.
That is interesting. I've never had a Manhattan, but it's like been on my list of things to do. But every time I go to a restaurant, I'm like, this place isn't bougie enough for me to like try one of these. Like I need it to be at a place that's going to make this like decent. But soon I will. Because I want to get into whiskey. I feel like it feels like a thing that would be fun to do. Tim, do you hate whiskey?
I don't know enough about it, so I would feel really, really bad. I mean, people invite me to go to different things, and I'm like, I'm just going to waste your money. I'm going to waste your whiskey because I don't really know what I'm doing. So, yeah, I don't have a palate that is designed for that. I need like a whiskey 101, a bourbon 101, and just really start from the bottom and work my way up.
Started from the bottom. Now we're here. All right.
Yeah. But you've been to some really cool places. What brought you back to the 757?
Yeah, so I was living in New York. So after I left Chicago, I moved to New York City. I was working, I guess, throughout the education sector. At first at this ed tech startup in Newark, and then at the New York City Department of Education. But really brought me home was the pandemic. So I was there March 2020. So we got the first wave of everything, and then ended up contracting coronavirus. Lost my sense of taste and smell, which to this day, I don't know if it's long COVID or not, I still can't smell or taste at the level that used to be.
Early on, you got it.
Yeah, like I think it was like maybe end of March, early April of 2020.
Oh wow!
So that was a dark time because we were like, oh, like what does this mean? Am I gonna die? Which was like jokingly, it was like kind of a thing because we didn't know at the time that was actually a symptom, and so. It was different for sure. And so then New York became like most of the world and like a desert island almost. It was just like nothing was happening. And then, I had a lot of friends who like were moving and going back home. And, for me, I had forgot that actually home was an option. And so I spoke to my mom. She's like, you can always move back home. And I'm like, you know what? I can't always move back home. And so October, I was like, I'm going to move home. And I did. And the goal was to stay for 3 months, and I was going to like get my own apartment back in Brooklyn in January. And then at the time, our work remote policy was extended to June, and I stayed to June. And then at that time, it didn't make sense to like leave. So I kind of grown accustomed to being back home. So
is home the Eastern Shore at that point, or is it somewhere else?
So home is Eastern Shore, but like my parents live in Chesapeake, but I have a ton of family that's still on Eastern Shore.
Got it.
So that time with the ed tech startup, is that what where you first got your taste of startup land and what drew you to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So I was working at this organization called Brick Academy in Newark, and so they were a school management organization. So they essentially managed 2 public schools. And my role was the director of instructional strategy. And I was really tasked with leading a lot of the kind of online learning platforms. And so we were working with like a lot of ed tech companies to do some of that kind of initial analysis. And so we implemented a few different systems. And so it was helping teachers to like really utilize the platform while also kind of building out dashboards to like make data more actionable for them. So that was definitely my first taste of startup life. And it was interesting to say the least. It's not for everyone, I will say that. But
what was interesting about it?
Just, for me coming from corporate America, right, where there, JP Morgan, where there's all the departments, all the folks who work on different things, right, and then being maybe a team of 5 when it's just like, everyone has to wear many different hats. And so it was interesting in the sense that like I was hired to do one job, but then, I was then pulled to do many other things that was not in my JD, but it was part of like the culture, right, to be super collaborative and to like, really pull your sleeves up and just, go all hands in. So
how do you learn that skill of, I don't even know if it's a skill, but like I think we're taught, and maybe it's changed, but we're taught this is the process, go work this thing, and then you're going to work at this company, it's going to look like this, and your role is this. But now there's this other aspect, not that startups haven't been around forever, but now it's it's cool to work at a startup where you don't necessarily know your duty or your role at the company or something like that. Like, is that just something that you just have to roll with the punches? Like, because I can just think of like probably even myself saying this way back when, like, that's not my job. I'm not going to do that. When I worked in, a corporate job, why would I do that? I'm not doing that. But now we're in this other business world where it's like, no, that's absolutely what you do. You don't really know your roles. Is that something that you learn? How do you process that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was definitely a struggle initially, but I think for the most part, you have to be really buy into the company's mission. So if you're buying into the company's mission, then of course you want to help out and see the company succeed and grow. And so for me, we were really trying to, ensure that all students had a shot at a fair education. So it resonated with me in that aspect that I wanted to do a good job and like where I could actually, lend my talents, I could, be helpful. So I did that.
So you didn't care that much about the banking industry, but the other aspect. So it matters kind of what the business is.
Yeah, banking felt, particularly at JP Morgan, like we were just helping rich people get richer. And I was just like, I can really take my talents elsewhere and like help, do some more social good, right? And feel like I'm actually, leaving the world better than I left it. And so that was my whole mission of like making the pivot into education was like, I wanted to do some social good.
Yeah. And with regards to that, where or when, or was there a specific thing that happened within your life that moved you towards the DE&I space that you're like, this is something I need to get involved in. This is a calling. What drew you to that area specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there wasn't like a particular experience or like singular like event that happened. I think, for me, I'm a product of public education. At the time, Kip the Peak School, elementary, shout out to Kip the Peak, was a Blue Ribbon School of Excellence. And so I was able to like take part in all the different like activities and programs I had at the school. And also had teachers that actually cared about doing their job. And so, for me, I think I was like living in Chicago at the time, or maybe New York. I have read a report about the school and how it actually became one of the lowest performing schools in the state of Virginia. And so that for me was like, well, how can I actually ensure that, folks who look like me have a shot at a decent education? And so that was kind of what made me realize to make the pivot into education, is because I was, considered to be one of the lucky ones, right? I made it out, quote unquote, or like of the country, right? But what made me so different, right? How come, or how can everyone actually have this opportunity? And so that was really the catalyst that, had me make the switch to education.
Do you notice that while it's happening? Like growing up, did you notice that? Or did it take the report to actually see that? Because I'm always interested, like, obviously it's on the front page of everything now, where it's very like it's in a very good spot from a branding perspective, like, hey, this is a thing. But like when growing up or going through that, did you realize it, or did you have to have someone explain it to you? Like how does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up, we're all naive, right? We're all young. And so like I feel like, these shows like diverse in the sense of like it being like the population that it reflects. Um, Whereas when I went to Chicago and New York City, there were students who only went to school with their own race, right? So I had white friends that were like, oh, I only went to school with white people, or like black friends, like, yeah, I've never actually interacted with like people who were not black until I got to college. And I was just like, really? Like, is that a thing? And I'm thinking like, this is Chicago and New York City, but like, how can folks, these are the progressive beacons of the world, right? Not be able to interact with people outside of their race until they get to college. And so that was kind of like the aha moment. It's like, oh, so everyone did not have the same experience as I did. And so for me, it was kind of that moment where I looked at my life like, wow, I'm actually pretty lucky to have a different experience and have somewhat of a diverse kind of eclectic group of friends that I've actually kind of, I still keep in touch with.
So intentionally siloed in those cases, I guess is what you're saying, that groups of students were one race to another, and that was the norm until they got to.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it was intentionally siloed from their perspective. It was more so like, because of segregation and the way that like school systems are set up, right? Particularly New York City is one of the most segregated school systems in the country. And you would think a city like New York City would have a better grapple of like how they would be able to do that, but not so much, right? So if you live in a certain neighborhood zip code, everyone that looks like kind of stays within their own groups. And so they tend to then go to schools with folks who look like them. And so there was a big push when I joined the DOE to like think through how do we actually think about desegregating schools in the 21st century, right? And, there's been a shit ton of articles of folks who are, for it and against it. And this new buzzword kind of way. But, equity, right? When you think about it, is like, how do we then take our resources that are like, limited, right? There's this zero-sum game when it comes to education, but how are we like divvying that up to folks who might be more deserving or need a little extra effort to ensure that they're kind of meeting the mark? But I digress from that point.
Well, no, it's really fascinating to me because it seems like every show we get off into running or some kind, but one of the things about the New York City Marathon that is really unique is that you go through all the different neighborhoods, the different ethnic neighborhoods as you're traveling through New York City. And I never really thought about it until you just mentioned it now, that probably each of Little Italy and Chinatown and all of that, they probably have their own schools that for that particular neighborhood. So I've never really thought about it from that standpoint. It's fascinating.
And New York City's school system is like probably the most complicated in the nation, right? Because they have 1.1 million students that are like actually from K to 12. Mostly K to 5 or primary education is kind of regulated to like neighborhoods. Whereas middle schools, you can attend middle school in your borough likely. And then for high school, it's open enrollment. So if you live in the Bronx, you want to attend a school in the Queens, you can, but you have to go through this application process, which I was like completely floored. I was like, so you mean to tell me I'm an 8th grader, I'm applying to up to 12 high schools and I have to like be selected based off of like, location and geography. So it's a complete burden for parents and families to figure out how to navigate that. And so part of my role at the DOE and the Office of Student Enrollment was to kind of think through like, how do we make the enrollment process easier for families to like navigate, what they used to call the high school directory, the Bible or the phone book, right? Because it literally was the size of a phone book of like over 680 schools that you can apply to in high school, right? And so if I'm a family with limited resources or I'm a working mom who is single and like, how am I able to navigate that on my own? Whereas, there's another family who may be more fluent, who come from a 2-parent household, may have other help that can actually take the time out to help them navigate the system. And so we did a few different things to kind of combat that. But overall, I think that, New York City still offers some of the top schools in the country. And so my role was kind of think through like, how do we ensure that like everyone, regardless of race, background, income, socioeconomic status, has a chance to be able to attend those schools.
Interesting. What, with that lens, and then you return back to Virginia, what was your initial thought? I mean, so you moved into the role that you're in now. Are you like, oh, easy day, or did you view this as, wow, we've got a lot of work to do?
Yeah. So I think, for me, And so I guess to take a step back, I was also kind of like doing a lot of consulting at the same time. And so the pandemic kind of, it lighted a fire underneath me to kind of do more. I felt like, working throughout the system, it felt highly bureaucratic. There wasn't much that was happening at a large scale, right? Change inside the system is marginal at best. And so some friends and I got together, we created this group called the Nationhood. It was more of a passion project. This is kind of post George Floyd's murdering. And so we got together, wanted to create something to do, right? Because at the time we were like, oh, well, there's still the pandemic. We all felt like we were a little bit aged out to do protesting because we were like, okay, like, how do we fit into this? And so we created this civic engagement guide called the Liberation Toolkit. And it basically like walked folks through like how to really leverage their local elected officials to rally around change through policymaking. And so that got a lot of views, and it ended up actually us working with this one agency called Maestra, and they're a social impact agency, and they do a lot of social impact campaigns that are geared towards like a holistic approach to like DEI, right? So I think the buzzwords now has been DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, but then we talk about social impact. So if you create a program, like what are the ways in which we're actually creating more of a holistic approach to like programming? And so one of the things we had the chance to do was work through a bunch of different filmmakers. So one of the films was called Time. This is through Amazon Studios. And so the film itself was about mass incarceration in this family. It documented them and their struggle with being incarcerated in Louisiana, which has the highest prison population in the world. And so we wanted to really provide more of a roadmap, laying the foundation of mass incarceration. So we developed this campaign that included like this education toolkit, also like this like site that kind of like captured folks's kind of time loss. And so the film was kind of launched in addition to the film. And so we were doing a lot of that work, which is kind of similar to DEI. But to get back to your question, as far as like, what does it look like when I came back? It was like, how do I take that experience, right? Where we're building out these campaigns and these different type of initiatives, programs, and apply it here in a real way.
I mean, it seems like there are a ton of initiatives out there to try to combat this, to improve it. As you're talking about this, I thought about something over the last few months, which is the Rooney Rule from the NFL, which is trying to hire more Black head coaches. They just done a terrible job of that overall. And I think everyone would admit that. Pete Carroll came out last week, I guess, and he's a head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. I think he still is there. And he was like, this is never going to change until basically the old white guys figure this out and start hiring people that don't look like themselves. Like, there's things in place that are knowing with what I just said, and there's tons of other programs and initiatives out there with stuff in place to try to combat DEI and to improve it. It just doesn't seem like the needle is moving in a lot of these things, even though things are in place to do it. Like, in your opinion, what is it going to take to actually start to see improvement on some of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that's been kind of framed, right, it's super polarizing, right? We have the left and the right. And so part of my work has been through this idea of like narrative change. Like, how do we use language that doesn't seem divisive, but then brings people together, right? Because we're better together than we are apart. And so the way that like both sides have kind of framed the debate around DEI and, most recently too here, critical race theory, right? It's about how do we tell our history in a real way that folks can understand that people of color who have been marginalized through systemic oppression, racism in this country have been left behind, right? That's a fact. But at the same time, us getting resources and thinking about how we can have initiatives and programs that are geared towards ensuring that we have a diverse representation of what this country is made of doesn't seem, from a white person's perspective, that they're losing anything, right? This is a societal gain, right? And I think the way that it's currently being framed, it's particularly for white men, right? They're always feeling like they're the target, is that they're losing something, right? And so if we could frame it in a way of, this is actually the benefit for society as humans, right? Then I think that could actually get some more legs to stand on potentially. But I also think that like, it actually just requires people to have conversations, right? And so like, if you're talking to people who don't look like you, then you realize actually we have a lot more in common than we do different, right? And so how are we bridging difference along dialogue, right? And being in conversation, right? Creating, spaces where people can ask questions and, deliberately, right? And they may not know, they may not have the right framing or the right phrasing or the right language to use, but they're actually willing to learn, and they're like able to kind of be in conversation to kind of figure out how they could, view the world and through your lens.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially when I think about Hampton Roads as its own MSA. And I tell everyone, first question everyone always asks is, where is Hampton Roads? What is Hampton Roads? But once we get past that, the way that I describe it is, I'm like, it's the largest small town that I know about. I mean, a population of 1.7 million people, but yet it's still such a small town in the sense of, the group of people that are decision makers, so to speak, is a very, very small circle. And I think that there's a lot of people that are in these circles and decision makers that really don't want to see things change. And, and that could be based on a broad scope of things, whether if it's, we don't want to bring big tech companies in here because we want to keep population small, we want to keep classrooms small, whatever the case is. But it's interesting in the sense of how small town Hampton Roads continues to be.
And it even goes to the Eastern Shore too. I was talking to one of my cousins, and there was this whole redevelopment project they were thinking about building there, but the town council voted against it because they want to keep it a very small town. They don't want a bunch of outsiders coming in. It's if y'all haven't been, we should go. I'll take you to all the best spots. But there's this sereneness to it that actually is really nice, to be in a place where it just feels like, life is easy. There's not the hustle and bustle, and folks over there like that. I mean, I like it too, but I think there's a balance in which we can kind of provide additional resources for folks who live there, job opportunities that may not exist, but at the same time still keep it so that folks aren't getting displaced. Because I feel like that's where the anxiety comes from, is this idea of displacement.
Well, and this is a broad statement, but I mean, people complaining about things that they're really just headlining. They're just reading a headline. They're not doing any research on. They're not seeing anything. And I remember the old city manager of Norfolk, Marcus Jones, told me a story once about how they saw a problem with Hampton Boulevard and too many tractor trailers, the 18-wheelers on it. And because they had blocked it in a certain amount of time, let's say from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., that was forcing everyone to be on those roads at a very specific amount of time. Mm-hmm. So their solution, through a ton of research and seeing this problem in other cities and how they fixed it, was to actually open up that time frame. So instead of having it being 6 hours, to have it be, let's say, 9 or 12 hours. And he said that so many people pushed back, or only a few people pushed back, but because they were the only ones that pushed back and there wasn't the opposite side, as a council, I guess they had to make a vote around something like that. But oftentimes people aren't even researching. They're just, they're reading 10 words, they're hearing one quote, and they're saying, oh, that I feel this way because of this. And it's hold on, this is actually going to fix your problem, allegedly. And, people don't even want to put in the research to do it. And, I'm not a big fan of headline and clickbait type of things, because I think it does get into the divisiveness of all of this stuff, when it's hold on, let's actually read the damn article to figure out what this thing is about. I was actually talking about that today online a little bit, just the Great Recession. Is that what it's called? The Great Resignation. Mm-hmm. And but what's interesting to me is I feel like that's a clickbaity type of thing, because it's okay, so I'm sitting there thinking, the Great Resignation, so everyone's quitting. Where are they working now? And all it is they're just going to another job. Well, you've done different jobs. You've told us that today. Yes, you moved around a different career, but is it really that different until you do some research into it and learn that actually what it sounds like is, yes, there are other people who are just banking on Bitcoin and making it be great.
And that was a joke.
That's what Tim's response was, right? But I look at that and I go, okay, I'm questioning this. I want to know about it. please tell me your thoughts. And some people were like, yo, I moved careers. Okay, so really it's about I had this career forever. I used to be a nurse and now I'm in IT. Like let's just research a little bit more and stop trying to like headline stuff and clickbait stuff so that we
it's really more of a reset than it is
which is
resignation.
Fine. Okay, I don't want to be in that job anymore. I want to do something different. There's nothing the matter with that. Is it really that like alarming? But you read these articles and you see these headlines and you're like, wow, this is a big deal. People are still working. It's not like they're quitting their jobs, and never doing anything.
Right.
Yeah.
I digress.
Yeah, I mean, so with that, you've been in your position now for 3-4 months, and I think
on my 90 days.
Okay, so almost 3 months. You've had a chance to kind of look at the landscape, see what's what. So what have you noticed? Yeah, in terms of what types of things do you have ahead of you that to start making your mark in the startup entrepreneurial space?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's been nice actually chatting with everybody. Like I've chatted with, I think at this point, over 70 ecosystem partners. So a bunch of different founders who've, come through our various programs at Startup Studios, 757 Accelerate, and 757 Angels. I've chatted with a lot of other organizations who are doing work within the community. I've chatted with some council members, both at the, across the cities, right? And so it's been interesting because I think everyone is really excited about the opportunity that exists here. But we are a small market, right? We are really, we're not the Austin, Texas of the world. We're not, SF or like New York, any of these like larger markets when it comes to like, just like the volume of folks who actually have a startup idea, right? And I think when you think about the larger scale of like, okay, we have this startup community, right? How do we then provide, more pathways for folks to get access to funding or get the support they need? And so the biggest thing that I've actually been hearing is that, where are the founders, right? Black or white. And for me, it really has been kind of like, again, going back to education, like what's our pipeline strategy, right? Because if we're not really setting kids up for success through K to 12, then how are we going to be able to kind of prepare them for college, right? To get into, careers or like majors rather that they can actually then have the skill set that's going to prepare them to then go off and to join a startup. Because to your point, Zach, right? How do you build a skill to be collaborative or a jack of all trade, right? You do sometimes have to specialize in something and then kind of move on, right? So they can kind of start to build up your toolkit of like, here are the resources and tools that I actually have in my arsenal that I can use. I mean, I know how to solve this exact problem, but I've solved the problem similar to this. I can kind of take what I learned from this problem and then apply it to this one, right? And so for me, it has always been and always will be, education, right? And I think for us, starting at where we sit, right, we're sitting at the startup level. So like, how are we working with universities to really start to ensure that like, professors have entrepreneurial training, right, and that they're working in collaboration with us to ensure that like the students that are actually at their universities have what they need to actually start to build out a prototype, right? Start to kind of think through like what product or service they actually want to kind of focus on, what problem it is they were trying to solve, right? And then how do we then create a plan that exists around that, right? So that then they can start to move to potentially joining 757 Accelerate where they have an MVP, right? And so starting to continue in that way. And so that's some of the work that I've been kind of looking at and thinking through like how we can do that. But it also requires everyone, right? And so then you think about what does that look like at a high school level, right? What are the programs we're doing to ensure that students have access and opportunity to participate in like hackathons or like working on a particular like program initiative that they actually can solve a problem. And then even going further down like to middle school and then K to 12, like what are the skills that students need to know, obviously other than critical thinking, right? And being able to like have the math background too, right? That's going to allow them to, be successful once they kind of move throughout their education career.
It's interesting that you said, where are the founders, right? I'm interested in a little bit more context on that. Who is saying that? Is it founders saying where are the other founders, or is it the others asking where the founders are?
I think it's just a general question of like how we can do more, like when it comes to high tech, scalable growth companies, Like, where are those founders, right? I think there's a lot of folks who are creating companies that might not have or be tech enabled, but they still could actually.
I mean, to me, I feel like that's environment to some extent. It's people willing to take a risk. It's people that are interested in that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I feel like that. Like, I don't know that can be changed in that kind of way immediately, because it is something that there is so many years of you're taught this is what's going to happen. This you're in high school. You're going to go to college. You're going to go work for the man. And now we're sprinkling in this other stuff. I think that's a hard task to do when you haven't seen that company that people are probably looking for in this area to look at and say, oh, I want to be that. Or even if that is happening, we're not showcasing that company the way that other areas are. I mean, I don't know. I'm 38 years old now. So that means I got on Facebook at what, 04? In 04. And that company got a ton of hype around stuff. If we had a company like that, that's now 18 years old, is that math right? Like, is there a company that we're going to see being that at 18 years from now? Are we even sprinkling a little bit of love towards that so people can start to say, hey, like, I want to do that thing. I personally believe that this area's worst amenity, worst asset is their lack of championing businesses, whether that be the smallest business or the biggest business, right? So you got companies that over the last decade have been sold for close to $1 billion or over $1 billion, and there's very, very little information about that. Not like, oh, what was the actual deal? Just like people saying like that's a big positive thing. And if we can't even get behind the companies that have done that, what makes us think that these little companies that are nowhere near that but could get to that, that we're gonna see that kind of love? Pharrell in his the Elephant in the Room performance speech, whatever you call that. I think it was Pusha T. Is that who was on stage with him?
Yeah, Pusha T.
He said when we, from a music industry standpoint, he said, we can't even release music here. We have to release in other places because we don't get the same kind of love in our own community. And so it was interesting to hear that from a music perspective, that we also kind of see that in the business side of stuff too. And so I don't know if that's something that just has to continue to be pushed down people's throat in a positive way. That's like, hey, like, this is what we need. But it was interesting that some of the biggest musicians in the world couldn't even release music in their backyard, kind of like some of the biggest businesses in the world here aren't getting the love that you would expect them to.
Yeah. Agreed. I think there is that's part of the reason why I left too, right? I left, Virginia after college. It was like, well, I'm out. Bye. Like, I don't want to like go elsewhere, right? The brain drain. They talk a little bit about that at the Elephant in the Room event, which is a thing, right? Because
it's not like there aren't smart people here. I don't think anyone ever questions that, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think that because, it's twofold, right? It's like, how do we create the environment, the infrastructure, and the systems to get people to stay? But then, like, also, where is the culture that happens that keep people here, right? I think there's a lot of, things that are happening, or that could happen, like obviously something in the water, right? There's a lot of old guard leadership and like people, to your point, Tim, around like just wanting to keep it more of a small town. And so how do we, one, elect younger leadership that kind of buys into the ethos that like we can still be a small town, but at the same time, we can provide additional resources and things for people to do, right? So it starts there too. But at the same time, to your point too, Zach, it's like, how do we also champion the folks who are actually doing the work here? And that's a concerted effort across multiple different industries and mediums to like, hey, this is what we want to represent as the Hampton Roads region.
But you can't get behind you can't get behind the Shamrock Marathon if you can't get behind the Something in the Water concert. They're the exact same thing. There's nothing different. So like, you can't say small town and Shamrock's okay when that's a weekend-long event with a ton of people coming in, and then Something in the Water, which is a weekend-long event with tens of thousands of people coming in. They're the exact same thing on the surface. So like, that to me, like, I would call BS on something like that and be like, yo, you have these things, like,
I mean, culturally, right? Like, how do we then start to change mindsets and shift mindsets? And I think, again, it exists across a conversation across difference, right? We're bringing people together right now. Not everyone, you know, that you're going to bring to the table is going to be bought into the idea, right? There's some people that like you just kind of have to leave by the wayside. But like for the folks that do, right, how can we create this coalition of folks who want to move the needle and kind of move us towards progress and towards future and innovation? Because there's a lot of folks, obviously us on this call, you know, us at 757 Collab, you know, and throughout the community that want to see this area thrive and be the beacon of light that we know it can be, right? But like, we need to ensure that the conditions are set up so that way, you know, there can be success, right?
With that, the other part of your position is strategic partnerships. So like, have you started to formulate some of that strategy in terms of what partnerships that you would like created? I would venture to say, no pun intended, that the entrepreneurs and the startups and founders, they're probably more than willing to do, hey, I just want to succeed. What do we need to do? And then it's a matter of reaching out to other folks. I mean, have you thought about your strategy moving forward to create those strategic partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, we have some. I've had a chance to really think through some of that. I think again, for us, it's really about building trust, right, and having these conversations to like start to like build authentic, real relationships, right? And that doesn't happen overnight, but it definitely like requires consistent effort towards a common goal. And so mostly has been just mostly like kind of initial conversation, kind of thinking through like, hey, you know, just want to know what people are up to, what they're doing, and kind of thinking the ways in which we can kind of continue the conversation. And so I'm hoping that there's going to be something really big in the fall. I don't want to give too much information away, but I really want to kind of think through that more so that we can kind of like really ensure that we have the folks that need to be at the table are at the table, right? We're not, you know, selectively leaving out people that are required, that are also doing the work, right? Because to your point, Tim, earlier around like, you know, there's a group of folks who are kind of the movers and shakers that are like really moving things along, right? How do we bring more people to that table to ensure that like, you know, there's representation, one, but also that like there's a collective agenda that everyone can kind of buy into that's going to like lift the region as a whole, right? Not just like Chesapeake or like Norfolk or Virginia Beach, but like Hampton Roads, which seems to be, you know, I inherited that problem, right? A little bit. There's always this like kind of crab in the barrel mentality a little bit around cities, and rightly so, right? I feel like cities have been kind of positioned in this area to feel like they need to compete with another city to get resources. But like, I think the shift in mindset needs to come from around thinking about how we look at this region as
a scapegoat.
It is a scapegoat. But I think like, how do we look at this as a Hampton Roads region, not just like, oh, Virginia Beach is doing this, Norfolk is doing this, but like,
what city in the world doesn't have that? They're a city next to it. I mean, it to me, like, we waste so much time on that conversation. It's such a waste that cities are like, oh, I'm gonna compete against. I'm just like, you're wasting time. Like, scapegoat. Like, get over it. Like, who cares?
Yeah. Well, I mean, go ahead, Travis.
I was gonna say, what could it look like? I mean, I don't know what the legality of this is, but what if we turn the 7 cities into the Hampton Roads and that be one major city, right? And then like each,
but to the outside world, that's how it is, right? It's right. You know, if it's done as a metro, it doesn't look at the little cities. It doesn't care, right? If you look at it, I don't know the exact numbers, but look at the DC metro, right? I'm sure DC proper is less than 1 million people, yet the entire metro is 7 million people or so, right? You don't look at that, and they all work together. Most of them want to work in the suburbs at this point because they don't want to drive into DC from that perspective. It works. Like, it's ridiculous when you see these people who are at the table, but the big, you know, founders is something that you want to escalate and champion more and to push, but you don't see a lot of founders at that table. But yet founders and businesses from that perspective is what a lot of the initiatives that the people at the table are looking to push. How do you combat that? How do you fix that?
By just ensuring that we have representation, right? I think, you know, founders themselves too are like working on a specific problem, right? Especially our founders, they're early stage founders. And so they're also busy, right? They're trying to launch their product or service, right, into the marketplace. And so like for us, it's like, well, who are the founders that actually are now at a later stage that can actually devote their time and resources, energy towards ensuring that they have a seat at the table to be a representative of other founders, right? And I think for us, we have some of those folks who we always call on to, but it's also looking at founders that may not live in the Hampton Roads area, but are from here, right? There's a lot of folks that we just talked about who are from this area, who've done amazing things, who live elsewhere, right? What is the kind of return to home theme that we've been calling it, that we can kind of start to leverage and bring people back here as a way to kind of like give back and like, push forward and like really reach back and, push other folks forward. So that's kind of been my thing too, kind of thinking through like how we can like start to really create alumni base of folks, who may not necessarily be associated with 757 Collab, but like have at some point, grew up here, have ties here, have family here, but like, want to get back. And the folks that I've chatted with, right, they want to like, well, how can I push in? Like, what can I do to get more involved? And so we just need to create a funnel for them to do that.
Real quick. When I did Start Norfolk, Tim, I think it was Start Norfolk 3. You might have been associated in some of these like preliminary meetings, but it was like the coming home edition is how I wanted to brand it. We didn't ultimately do this, but it sounds like what you're talking about, Travis. And it was like, okay, who are all the famous people, business or not, associated with the 757, and how can we bring them here? So obviously Mike Vick was on there. The guy who created Skillshare, Michael Karjakinaporn. I cannot believe I just pronounced his last name correctly. I was just practicing it for 17 seconds. And there was a plethora of other people as well. Obviously you got the Missies, the Pharrells, and people like that. And I like the idea of that, of getting those people at least to do something back here. We didn't end up doing it, so hopefully you guys can. But there's a ton of people. Like I'm sure if you just went to Wikipedia and typed in Hampton Roads, famous people. Bob Saget lived here for a little while. He's not from here, but obviously he passed away.
I didn't even know that actually.
Yeah, I just read one of his books, and he's talking about how he was at Ocean View Elementary. I mean, it's cool to hear
Mike
stories.
Mike Tomlin has a house on Eastern Shore, actually.
Oh, he does. Oh, well, he went to William and Mary, right?
Yeah. Isn't that where he has a house on Eastern Shore? Michael Jackson, before he passed away, was thinking about buying a house here on the Eastern Shore at one point in time too. There's so many
Neverland
of us, right? Neverland too. Even the younger folks coming up. Masego, he went to Princess Anne. He's from here. Amazing artist, saxophonist. There are, I guess Drum now. I forgot what he changed. Chelly, he's also from here. He's always around.
He came to Hatch once. What?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, back in the day.
I mean, the thing that I just can't get past, and Travis, when you said it, I 100% agree with you that you have to build that level of trust so that people feel comfortable. But at the same time, I'm like, man, we've been trying to build a level of trust for like 400 years. And it's just like, at what point do something's got to happen, especially when that inner circle, this kind of seems like it's just a round robin thing. Everybody just rotates to the next position. And then, when we rotate, we need to make sure that we hire someone else who thinks the same way, acts the same way, looks the same way. Boy, you've got a really, really tough job. And I wish you all the success possible as you continue to trudge through all of that. And certainly if there's any way that I can help out in any way, I'm happy to do that. I as a resident of this area for 20 years, kids product of the schools here. I care a lot about this area. And the thing that frustrates me so much is just the fact that we have so much potential, and we've been working with so much potential for so long. And it's just like a startup, right? It's all about the execution. It's time to execute. And if I can help with that execution, please count me in.
Can I'm while we're talking, I'm looking at the list that I told you guys to look at. I just like a Wikipedia from Hampton Roads. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
We got all the heavy hitters, honestly.
Yeah, there's a couple people I didn't even know.
Is probably from Virginia. Honestly, if you think about your favorite somebody, they're likely from Virginia.
Did you know Mark Ruffalo is from Virginia Beach?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was shocked at that. I mean, this is wild. Like, even I'm impressed by this. Evan Marriott, the actor in Joe Millionaire. I mean, I don't know who that is, but apparently he's famous enough to have a Wikipedia. Like, this is just, there's plenty of people. Like, yeah. Travis, this is great. What's something we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
I don't know. I mean, we talked a little about food. I'm a foodie. I grew up actually as a short line cook on Eastern Shore. So I was
well, that was one of my questions I wanted to ask you. What was your favorite thing to prepare?
It's funny. So shout out Julie McNeil. I don't know if she sees this. I haven't actually been in touch with her, but she used to have a place in Cape Charles called Harbor Grill. And I was like working there at 16.
Let's put her on the list.
I know. I mean, she started making, I was dishwashing. And then like one day the sous chef quit and she's like yelling because we had service. She's like, I need you on the front line. I'm like, okay. And so I did. And then like, I think, it was funny because then from there I was like, I'm never washing dishes again. And so I ended up actually being a short line cook, but every Thursday through Saturday, the dinner menu changed. So she did like an 8-course dinner menu. And so I think one of the dishes that I actually had a chance to like curate the menu once I got like my footing was we did this tuna, like rare tuna tiki, which is like this seared tuna steak with like, I think we had like shrimp in it with like this glazed balsamic vinegar and like something else. But like I was making that at 16, but not to harp on like to your point, Zach, about like you go to school, you get a job, you work for the man, but like had I actually like thought about owning a restaurant, it wasn't even a thing that I can actually be a chef, right? Become classically trained as a chef or whatever, and then like open up a restaurant and like have my own thing. That wasn't even an option. It was just like you're working here to kind of like save money and like go to school, and then go to school, get a job, and like get a career that you can like work for 30 years and then retire.
And we still push that, I'm sure. I'm not in school, but I'm sure that's what they push.
They do. I feel like some school systems have been kind of making a transition from just not to be college ready, but college and career ready. So like you may not necessarily want to go to college right after that. And honestly, I don't know what the data is, but I feel like this is a trend. But like kids usually or nowadays are not going directly from high school to college anymore, right? They're taking a gap year. They're doing some other like skill building thing that they're doing, right? Or, and a lot of it is like trying to figure out how to become TikTok famous, which, there are a lot of folks who can actually get success in doing that and becoming marketing gurus and viral folks, right? But that's also not for everyone. But like, there's also like careers in like video editing and being a creator and like all the other things that people can do. So like, how are we, ensuring that folks can have a diversity of like job opportunities, right? That they can do outside of just, being TikTok famous.
So Travis Young, are you trying to be TikTok famous?
No, I'm too old to be an influencer these days. I got freaked out actually in college with Facebook, right? Because I changed my name, and then I was just being goofy and like wanted to change my name, and I think I changed it to Tai Chi or something stupid, super ridiculous. People were referring to me on campus as Tai Chi, and I was like, "This is weird."
They changed my name. Your handle, your handle.
And I was like, "What?" And it was like, "What's up, Tai Chi?" I'm like, "Who?" Like, and I honestly didn't know they were referring to me because I'm just like, this is
you walked past so many people that were trying to talk to you, and you just ignored them. Ghosting them out left and right.
But yeah, so.
Well, this has been great. Learned a lot. I have a list of people now that I want to like become friends with as well. All the famous people in Hampton Roads are from here. That's great. Any parting words, Tim?
No, I appreciate all that you're doing on behalf of the region, on behalf of the founders in the entrepreneurial community. And again, I get if there's anything I can do to help with your efforts, please feel free to reach out. I wish you continued success, and I look to keep the conversation moving forward with you.
Awesome. Appreciate that. And thank you both for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. See you soon. Cheers.
So long.